last time.
Did you?
Yeah.
Did you get it all done?
Yeah, nothing. To
No
worry
issues, no
Yeah.
rezones
I think
in
someone
the near
showed up.
future.
about. That's right.
Spencer probably came too.
Huh?
I said you probably came too last time.
I was here.
Is
Yeah.
Dwight, is he joining us or?
I didn't hear from him. So I'm assuming he'll be here, but I didn't hear either way, so maybe not. We'll
Okay,
see.
well, we're gonna get started.
Yeah.
So we'll see if Dwight arrives, but welcome, Planning Commission, and then a joint workshop after. So we're gonna start off the meeting by a pledge by Herond and followed by a prayer by Kenny, and then we'll go into the agenda.
Repeat after me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our dear Heavenly Father, we are grateful that we can gather here today as a planning commission to hold a planning meeting and then also hold a joint workshop with the city council this evening. And we ask you to please guide us so we can make good decisions that will benefit our community and help us to come together as a community to serve one another. And please bless that we can make smart decisions and that we can seek to understand each other and understand all the different considerations that go into these decisions. And we say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Welcome, Dwight. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda as outlined.
Aaron Hoyt, I so move.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Minutes from a previous planning commission meeting. We had minutes from March 12th or 20 something.
24th, and I think there was some for the 10th in there, from 10th and the 24th.
Yeah.
I don't
Okay.
know if the 10th came in later, but those two.
Oh,
Entertain a motion to adopt those minutes from meetings in March.
I so move. I second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Just a quick note, that was
Heron
Heron who
second.
moved or Heron who second, Dwight
Dwight.
that moved.
Moved. Yeah.
Just so, because Marie's not here, so she knows who did what when she's listening to the recording.
Okay.
All right, Spencer, any issues from previous meetings?
Yes, only a couple things to follow up on. The Smiling H subdivision development plan went in front of the city council last night. They had been working on a few things, recommendations from the planning commission when it went through planning commission and also from staff. They did have a plan that was updated, but they didn't get it to the city council until that day. And so they reviewed, talked over a few things, but the city council declined to take action on it. So that'll probably pop back up on an agenda June 1st is when that's penciled in. And then the Clarkson 6-lot subdivision that was discussed in the last planning commission, given a positive recommendation. That one was reviewed in concept plan and approved by the city council last night.
Great. That everything to follow up on?
That's it.
Okay. Commission business workshop.
Okay, if everybody wants to move down to the table, grab a seat. I've got some things to pass out. We'll move some mics down, so we'll take just a little bit to get everything settled. And then I also brought cookies. Anybody who attended can also grab a cookie as well. I'll pass them around.
Yes. Take a picture of you and all of the members of Planning Commission to highlight you. Sorry, this does not have to be like so loudly. I would love, okay, fine. I'd like to highlight Planning Commission, my social media, if it would be okay with you. So if I could take a picture of you, if you don't want to do another one. That's fine. Okay.
How are you?
Are you related to any races from the city?
No. Probably a few
Sorry.
generations back, but not.
If we can just space these mics out evenly. And then
My aunt Lynette
keep in mind
is
is
a Reese. Yeah. Are you serious? Well, then we're like distantly related by marriage.
So, okay, so
Craig,
that recent part.
So I can see him recommend. Okay, all right. He's here to do it.
That recent part. That's. Sorry. We can share. Really.
We're really.
What's his name?
I don't know how much to share.
Yeah, okay.
Shift this here. Craig can grab that too. And then anybody sitting out there, we can do it. So we have a crowd. So if you want to stand up, you don't feel like you're so excluded, you're welcome to.
Usually I have to sit next to you.
Have those cookies and meetings.
She made them because the mayor was watching. I know. Well, it's not, probably not even one batch. It's probably a half batch.
dang, I need this batch of cookies. It's big as me.
Hey, and there's an napkin.
Apparently they shut off the gas bill or the gas. We don't hear a gas bill.
Yes.
They need their bills.
Did anyone take a bill?
It is particularly.
Yeah, I haven't
Oh,
had
yeah.
any food for a lot of hours.
So.
I'm gonna pass them around.
I mean, I did have R&R, but I haven't
Hey,
eaten
Alan.
much, so.
Loose.
He's
Wow.
passed
The
them
hair
around.
off?
Okay.
Yeah, I was down there for.
Hey,
Hey,
we
what's
told
on
you
that?
to-
Well, I actually got paid. I didn't even have paper.
It's gotta go like some central.
I did, I ended up trying to try something new, and then they didn't have it, so then they ended up with this together. It's fine.
We're fine. I'm easy.
No, thank you.
Oh, good, I'm gonna pull this all up.
Oh, I've got a printout and then,
I still have the
I'll
ones
also
where it's
pull
not.
up.
Did you make these?
That is great.
No, you didn't.
Oh,
Oh, I gotta go.
Spencer made it himself.
Oh, the cookies. I didn't get the handouts. No, I didn't make them.
We're the handouts.
Good enough to eat.
Orient myself.
Oh, is Lindsay coming?
I think
So she said she's gonna be late. So. All right. Okay, so I will get started. This workshop format, just a note to get started here. All of this is discussion. No action can be taken with the way it's agended, but it's helpful to get everybody on the same page. So none of these are actionable. It's mostly strategy, goal, trying to figure out what direction to move forward. I think it's helpful because a lot of times Planning Commission is working on different general plan elements, different things, and then sending it to City Council. It's helpful to get on the same page first before we split up and work on things separately. So that's just a background on this. I will move through a couple of items. There's also going to be some time near the end of this workshop where we'll have just a bunch of little items and items that if any of the council or commission members just have things to discuss, I think we need to use this time. Don't let me just do all the talking and directing is basically what I'm trying to say. So if you have things, it's more interactive in this case, as far as the commission and council. So the first thing that I wanted to talk over on this, I'll flip over really quick to just a rough agenda. Again, keeping in mind this is a lot more loose than a typical planning commission city council because it's a workshop. Mixed use development strategy going forward, moderate income housing plan. That one's due to state updates. We need to make changes. It'll be better to do that as one group rather than separate. And then just miscellaneous things going forward, updates, talking points. And again, that's going to be space for other goals, anything you want to pass on to staff or talk about amongst council and commission. So I'll get started here with mixed use. To give a little background as to why this is an item we'd like to talk about here. The first thing is we do have it as a strategy currently in our moderate income housing plan that was required by the state that we filled out. We have developments that have come in after that was put in our plan, west of Main Street. And it's just deciding what our strategy wants to be going forward, if we still want to have that as one of our options. Also, there have been quite a few different landowners and just developers who are interested in looking at our commercial land and if there's any residential density available. So mixed use at its base definition is just a development that's got a mix of commercial and residential. In this context, there are some mixed different types of residential. We're just talking about development that has some commercial and residential mixed. Go ahead, Craig.
Are there any ratios part of that, or can it be just small, one little barber shop and all the rest residential?
Yeah, right now, our ratio is less of a ratio and it's more of a, we only let it be vertically mixed in our mixed use zones. It's either in our residential city center adjacent zone, you can, if you want to, put a few units. And that example is the Four Seasons live work units. They put those in, wasn't required by code. I think they agreed to do it as part of their development agreement and put them in. Our city center adjacent and downtown, that's what we have left that's undeveloped. That's the only things we have left undeveloped that's mixed is city center, commercial, and downtown. Those ones require it to be vertically mixed, which means the entire bottom floor has to be non-residential. The housing has to be on top. So that's how the ratio is solved.
That's
So going forward, we could change that. And that's what this discussion would be, to get a strategy on how we want to approach this going forward. Or we could leave it the same. We could, if we do change it to have horizontal mixed use, so have a commercial building on the side and all residential buildings, which is easier for fire and building, we'd need a ratio like you mentioned, because we wouldn't want to have a little lemonade stand on the corner and then all the rest of it residential. So yeah.
Are we open to PUD?
Planned unit developments. We have done that just a couple times in our city. I think Aspen Meadows is one. We shied away from that. We didn't have good experiences with it in the past. So we kind of stuck with codifying in our city center code and rezoning instead of doing a PUD formula. We could go back to that. A lot of cities do. But I think just from past experience, we haven't.
I think if it's done right, I've been involved in one and I loved it. And I think to maybe implement some of that might be worth discussing, and then look at the ones that have done it right. We don't have as much land or, some of that, but.
And we could do all of this mixed use is going to be general enough to get a general direction that we could accomplish it several different ways.
Okay.
So that will come in as a strategy to actually accomplish it. We could decide PUD, we could decide rezone or overlay zone. We could do that as well. But so there, now that we've kind of talked moderate income housing, let me give you an idea of what we have currently. So like I said, bringing it up because it's in our moderate income housing plan, we have to update that. And we've had requests to kind of get a feel from City Council Planning Commission on the temperature there. As far as what we
What do you mean by that comment?
Yeah.
uh,
Like developers are asking?
developers and landowners,
But what are they asking?
if they can have residential density within commercial property. Listen, that's primarily it.
Okay.
So that
how-
would require an expansion of
You
this.
lost me when we switched to moderate income or. moderate.
Sorry, that was just a side note. We have 3 strategies listed in our current moderate income housing plan. One of them is increased densities in mixed use developments.
Okay.
So, and we chose that as one of our options. We have to update that plan. And I wanted to talk about mixed use just to see if that's still something we wanted to do, or if we feel like we've done all we can with that and want to pick a different strategy. We have to pick 3 from their list. And we'll go over that after this item a little more in depth. But if we don't want to keep having mixed use as part of our strategy, we'll discuss it here and then we can choose something else from the menu.
Sorry, Spencer. So these are 3 in addition to what was legislated a few years ago?
No, I
existing?
thought we were going to have to pick 2 more than we had before. I had read it wrong. There's different cities. If you have a transit fixed transit line in your city, then you have to pick 2 additional from the 3. We just have to pick 3 new ones or reaffirm the 3 we chose. They changed the wording though. So I have some papers that we'll go over that kind of shows how they change things a little bit. And we can pick from that menu. So, but I figured we go more in depth on this because this is a pretty big strategy that I think we need to be sure what we want to do overall as a city if we want to include it in our
You're talking
plan.
mixed use.
Yes, mixed use. So that's why I'm diving into this first before we get to modern housing. Sorry to,
Like,
this is a web that I live
did we
in,
forget the
so
clutch.
keep reminding me if I'm getting too lost in there. So right now we have city center commercial is this CCC that's red. So we've got it in a few different places. You can see on that handout, the dark blue is where that's existing currently. So we have that as a mixed use that allows residential and commercial. The residential density maximum allowed right now is 4 units per acre, which if you talk to a developer, that means it's pretty much 0. That's a really, really low amount of density in there, which if you can see by where the city center commercial is, almost all of it is empty. I think we've got 1 development here, Black Box, and they got a parking lot there. That one's just all commercial, no residential. The Bishop Storehouse was existing before that zoning came in, but the rest of it is empty. So that may be a sign that the densities aren't right to have development there. May also be other factors. The landowner just doesn't want to develop it right now. So it's kind of hard to say, but they are empty. The other one is downtown, and that one allows 8 units per acre. So that's a little background on where we're at currently without changing anything, without adding any additional. 4 units per acre in CCC, 8 units per acre in downtown. Both of those are pretty low numbers. Logan, just as a example, they allow residential in all their commercial, and their allowed units is on average 30. They have a couple zones that are a little less and a couple that are higher, 30 units per acre. Not saying that's something we should do. I did put that number in these so you could see what that impact would be. Yeah, just to give some context. So as far as strategies go, I think option 1 here, if you look at this handout, I'll pull this up here as well. Option 1 would be to keep the same. And I think in that case, we'd want to amend our moderate income housing plan to remove that as a strategy if we don't want to make any changes. Option 2 would just take the existing mixed use we already have zoned, don't rezone anything, increase the densities from that 4 and 8 to something a little higher. The other one is to pick up some of these other pieces of land that are maybe off of Main Street and a little more difficult to develop as commercial in our commercial zone. And this is the light blue you can see up here, rezone those to mixed use. The reason behind that, you have developers asking for it. That doesn't necessarily mean we have to do it, but we should evaluate it on a citywide scale to see if it's something we want to do. The one thing it would do for us is it would develop land that probably won't develop otherwise, or would develop into something that maybe we don't want. These spaces that are kind of tucked behind, and don't want's the wrong word there, but they're kind of tucked behind. It's hard to find a retail that fits into those necessarily if they're off of Main Street, if they're tucked in behind different things. It's hard to say maybe renovate or clean up a site if it's just commercial and there's other land that's on Main Street. It's not on as busy of a road. It kind of is an incentive without offering a financial incentive. It's saying, hey, you develop this, you still have to put in X amount of commercial, and we'd have to have a ratio or it'd be vertical or however we did it. They'll put in that commercial, we'll get storefronts, we'll get little ice cream shops, little sandwich shops, little barber shops, insurance offices, whatever. It wouldn't be a big box store type of situation, all likelihood. And with that, they also get residential that helps them make that investment pencil. That's what that would do. It would probably be a big boost for economic development. Not so much in the strategy we've gone in the past of trying to get a large big box as an anchor, and we still will do that and continue to try for that. But it'd bring in a lot of small businesses instead of just one big one. It would get commercial square footage built that could then be filled by little things. I think one prime example of it really is, as I referenced before, that Four Seasons Live Work. Not every one of those is full. There are a variety of different things, but a lot of them are. They're little salons, barbershops. There's Wolfpack Market down there. There's Comfort Care. There's a lot of things in there that we wouldn't have got otherwise without the residential. That is not to say that everything is just great. It's all pluses. I went over the positive as to why, but I also tried to lay out, because in the past we've talked mixed use. There's a lot of concerns that come with it. And I tried to lay out all of those. I put in this sheet an estimate of population, potential units on the different options, water use, taken as if each unit uses about 6,000 gallons a month, which is a little high. It may be a little lower than that, but that's about average on all housing types. And ADT is the average daily trips, car trips. So that's traffic, that bottom number, based on these different options and the different units per acre. And I talked with our staff, Zach Root with the water department, especially on timing if we did do this, and got some good feedback there. As far as to give some context to our water, which is maybe one of the biggest things, that number is in millions of gallons a month, which sounds arbitrary right now. Just to give a little bit of an idea, right now in the peak summer months, we produce about 75 million gallons every month. So if we have that 30 units per acre with the increased rezoning a bunch of things, and this is assuming it all gets built out all at once, and it's all built to the max density. Neither of those are true. So these are the very, very upper end limits. That would be 30 million gallons a month, or 25 million gallons a month, which is a 50% increase to our water use. Have to keep in mind that probably would get developed over time. Again, probably wouldn't be maxed out, but it's not something we should ignore. Also, one thing he noted was he would recommend we didn't rezone or increase densities right now, to wait to see what that well would produce that's going to be drilled in December. He's like, right now, adding things and encouraging development before we get this well drilled, from his perspective, it's not the right move. Wait to see what the water flows coming out are, get some reservoirs in, then come back and do this. So this might not be something we could look to implement right away if we're looking at water, but we could maybe look to reevaluate in about a year or so. So that's just an overview. What my goals out of this discussion from you is just really kind of discussing a strategy going forward, because it's a strategy and it's a citywide decision to say, hey, we're going to go into mixed use, we're going to utilize it, or we can say, hey, no, we're going to keep our commercial, we're going to keep our residential, just have the few mixed uses we have. We're not going to increase the densities and we're just going to let it lie. So I wanted to kind of get a round of thoughts really from everybody here on your opinions as to this, because I think it's a subjective thing. I don't think it's an objective right or wrong necessarily. So I'll stop talking now and let you guys discuss and answer any questions you have.
I think my first opinion is, I think 30 seems maybe too many per acre for our community. That's just initially, I just think that number seems extraordinarily high. At the same time, though, I do maybe think increasing densities wouldn't be a bad idea. That's just my initial thought.
So I spent the last 2 months in different workshops, and right now we're 6,000 units short here in Cache Valley. We have some businesses coming in that are going to require more housing. And with the interest rates and inflation going up, we have people that were looking at buying homes that were around 450. And they can't qualify for that now. So we have a different market that things have shifted. So right now, city planners and some mayors are talking about what we can do to create homes that would accommodate that people that are needing to get into their homes can afford. So we can't continue to build homes, unfortunately, that are the 600,000 plus. There's a market, and so I have Brett Nelson, who's doing a massive development over in Logan right now. He's going to come out on Tuesday and drive around. And so I'm thinking we've got some really great people that are willing to come out. We have Sunrise Engineering. I met with them 2 weeks ago and then last week. So if you guys are interested, these are people that do this for a living. And, I have a little bit of experience, but I really like the idea that we have some people locally that are really concerned about Cache Valley, and they're willing to come into North Logan. So before I love that we're having this discussion, and I've had, probably 400 people that I've reached out to just say, what would you like in this survey? What would you like in this community? What would you like to see happen even in our county? And so it's been kind of interesting because they are saying they would like more walkable. They'd like more. I'm more of the PUD walkable. I like the mixed use and all of that together because I feel it gives you a little bit different than we're just going to say this whole area is mixed use. So as we're doing this, I'm happy to bring them both in if we can meet again. And then after they've kind of done their assessment, then we can maybe say, okay, here's what we decided tonight. And how could we make this to where going forward, we're getting that expert advice. So kind of like you get an architect to start your plan, you don't go to your subcontractor first. I'm thinking, let's go to the architects first and then get the opinion too of the people that live here. There's a reason why people want to live here. So let's reinforce, that we've embraced that and not make some quick decisions. So I'm not saying that we're making quick decisions now. I'm just saying, if you want, I can get them here.
Yeah. And yeah, definitely a side note. This is we're not making any decisions
Right,
tonight. This
no.
would be the kickstart. If we decide to go
Right.
down in one of these strategies,
This
we
is a
would need to
long,
get
yeah,
more
this is a
involved.
long process. So I'm just saying, we're pretty lucky to have some of the talent that we do locally. So, yes.
Spencer, with
yes.
all of the mixed development or mixed use units, et cetera, and so forth, we're looking at doubling, tripling, quadrupling our water consumption.
Yep.
And what's our projection as a city for being able to keep up with these kinds of entities? I mean, that's basic service, and we're already,
Yeah.
we're on schedule, water restrictions right now, and it's going to be even worse next month. And so that probably has to be one of our major drivers here, is the consideration for culinary water, and if we're going to be able to meet those needs going forward.
Yeah, no, and that's a big thing. That's why I included it on this sheet. I think that does need to be a very significant driver. Compared to a single family home up on the bench or somewhere that doesn't have secondary water, these are going to use less water per unit. But if we are looking to rezone or add density, that's adding units in places where they weren't before. So it may be less per unit than another development, but it's still more water and more units, especially if you're rezoning commercial. If you take something general commercial, I mean, it could be storage units that uses no water and maybe a little on landscape that would come from a secondary line. It could be an office building that uses very little for the amount of people it serves. So it is a factor. And I think we would have to be very sensitive to that. And I think any of these strategies, maybe long-term, we pick a strategy that we're working towards. But I think we'd want to be very cognizant of what our water situation is and not either rezone too much or increase densities too much before we're sure our water can handle it. And that would be working close with our water supervisor and Zach and Jordan and Alan as well. So.
And you did say that Zach already recommended against increasing densities or rezoning until that new well is built and we actually see what production comes out of that.
That was his recommendation, was, hey, right now, I think, and granted, if we did something, we recommended we want to increase densities or rezone something, that would go to planning commission. That would take time. Somebody would have to apply. That would have to be approved. So it's not like you'd have units in the ground taking water tomorrow, but it would be smart to say this well doesn't bring out as much water as we had studied and forecast. That would be something good to know. And then we wouldn't have to go and take back some code potentially. So I think that might be a good decision, is to wait and make some changes once we find out those numbers.
This is probably a really dumb question, so I apologize for this, but could we increase the density on some of them or all of them? Like, or is it sort of like, if we decide to increase or do more potential mixed use, are we increasing the density on all of them?
No, so we could, there are a couple different ways we could do it. And I simplified it just to make it pretty clean and easy, and made it 3 options, but you
Yeah.
can mix and match a whole bunch. So you don't have to rezone in all of the pieces I had listed to rezone. You also don't have to increase the density on all the pieces. If we wanted to increase the density, the easiest way would just be to change the number in the code from 4 to 12 or whatever. And that would do it for all of the existing. But if we wanted to just do one piece to increase that we felt could use it, and we'd have to be pretty measured and deliberate on that, I think, and have good logic as to why one would have more density than the other, because it does affect values of land. We could rezone, make a new zone that's mixed, have a certain density, rezone that one parcel. So mixed use zone, rezone it to get it to 12. So we could pick and choose.
Is that? Oh, sorry.
The question that I've got is also one that has been the water issue. We're right now, I think, at a breaking point even before this well, or maybe even after this well comes in, that we can't supply the amount of water that we need. Secondly, are we looking at things that are going to be so densely populated that we ruin the character of our community? I think that there are people who in the community right now who like the way that it is. There's open spaces, there's places that you can look and you can see the mountains. And if we start building out and up, we're going to destroy that character.
Go ahead, Buzzy.
Oh, man, I was. Well, I have to write this down. Each other so well. I would, just a couple quick comments. For me, the water closes the deal, right? Like we have to get through that, and there's no rush to force any of this through while we're trying to get this water in place. Now, if by some miracle that well comes out and it's significantly better than we thought, and we can sustain some increases in density, then that's a different story to me. But I think as a body, the strategy we need, what I like about this workshop tonight is it's pretty clear that we all probably agree without water, there's nothing we can do. But I do feel like I hear from people like Heron just said, that said, I don't want this community to change. I like the openness. Then I hear from people with younger families that say, guess what? My kids can no longer live here anymore. And I've shared this last time, and I get this a lot more lately than I got 2 years ago when we got together. So I think the responsibility for this thing, for this body, is to just wait and see, but not necessarily be close to the idea of some small amounts of increased density, because I think we owe that to the upcoming generations for the reason that we all were able to live here. Go ahead, Jeff.
This sounds like just our discussion a year ago.
Yeah.
I'm more.
Yeah. Was that all you had? Yeah, so I'm just going to reiterate my feelings from the last workshop we had about this. So I'm in favor of no change, and for a few reasons. One, we have limited commercial space, and that's, revenue generating areas that we need to keep the things going in the city. So I'm very cognizant of that, and I feel like the mixed use is a little bit of a way for development, and I'm sympathetic to development. I do it outside of the city, but I do think that right now it's the buzz that's around, and it's the way to work around and get my multifamily units and developments into communities. And I tag on this little commercial, hair salon or whatever underneath. But the big thing is about the multifamily and higher density going in. And so I'm very apprehensive to give up the limited commercial space that we have. The biggest thing for me is character of the community. We face this. There's been significant feedback that we've got as we've looked at rezoning and requests for higher density. and people, the neighbors, as they come forth, that's what we hear over and over and over again is the character of our community. And I specifically live here for that reason. And I think a lot of the community members feel that same way. And then the water obviously is a big thing. I'm very apprehensive of anything going on with the water situation. I don't have the answer of how to balance, and I'm sympathetic. The housing crisis isn't Cache Valley's thing; it's everywhere. And so I don't know what the answers are to that. I'm more open to looking at traditional type of housing like we see in other parts of our community, and are there things that we can do to provide some of those housing needs in those areas rather than just every time going right to the multifamily lever. So that's,
Well, Jeff,
What do you think?
I mean, I got the same comment when I
Yeah.
was knocking doors last summer of like, I just really don't want the change in the character. And then in the same breath, they'd be like, but my kids who are both married live in my basement, or we're wanting to know if we can build an accessory dwelling unit in the backyard so that so-and-so, because they're like, I don't think they'll be able to afford a house.
and we're open to ADUs.
Well, I'm not saying that we're against it. I'm more just saying though, like, I just think like we can't, when we say character, the people who I notice who are most concerned about the character, these developments would affect, in my opinion, the least. The ones who I heard it from the most were high enough on up the bench that it was like, okay, so if we built it next to Four Seasons, would this affect your view?
Yeah,
And it's like,
it's not
really.
just the view though. It's
Or-
the traffic. It's my
Yeah.
property taxes that got raised last year because because costs are going up for emergency services. That's the character. It's not the view.
No.
It's the things that it's being able to drive around and see a little bit of open space.
Mhm.
Those are the things that are impacted regardless of where they are. And so that's when I say character, that's what.
Okay, I mean, those are solid things, but I think we're always gonna run into this issue, I guess,
I'll
is
just
my
make one
thought.
counter argument on property taxes because we're dealing with that now. So get ready.
Oh, good.
I think, part of what we're trying to strive for right now is commercial. And what we're finding, confidentially among some businesses is that you don't have enough people in North Logan. I want my business south of 1600.
Sure.
Because that's where the people are. Well, it's enough order for us to offset some of our costs. We've got to have greater economic development, right? That's the driving mechanism around revenues for the city. So that's why I say we should at least not necessarily look now. Am I in favor of 30? Absolutely not. It's 12 more right line probably. But, and that's of course, assuming our resources can handle it. But I think that's the point of that is there's actually probably a balance somewhere that we as a group need to try to find. And if we keep our densities lower than our neighbors, then we've effectively blocked a lot of economic development that's going to drive our revenues in the future. So we can't be frustrated when our taxes go up. Our public safety will increase every year just on salaries alone, right? So that's my point, is to say, are we at the right spot? I don't know. We're probably a little low, in my opinion, if resources can handle it down the road. But that's the balance we're trying to find. It's not easy, but it's not easy to answer. It's not easy question.
Spencer, where do we fall? So I want to almost exclude Logan from this. Where do we fall in terms of like Smithfield? What are their density requirements?
Yeah,
Do they
no,
have-
every city is different. And the
Okay.
tough thing is,
Let's compare to Hyde Park.
yeah, well, yeah, you look at
Smithfield's a
Hyde
bit of a
Park.
free for all.
Okay, sorry, excuse me.
I'm just leveling with you.
No,
Yeah.
I was just picking a city. I'll pick a different one, whichever one they say. 'cause
Don't
they know
pick
more.
Providence either.
Yeah. Well, I would
Hyde Park.
I would say we are doing a lot of lifting on
Yeah.
our moderate income housing, primarily in some of our existing, so like apartments behind Walmart. We have a lot of apartments people don't realize are in North Logan, that we actually have a lot more multifamily housing than you would think. So I think compared to a Hyde Park, it's pretty clear that they're not really doing anything but half acre and acre, right? Smithfield, I think, has a lot more, it looks like it's a lot more developed. Their single family densities are around 10,000 square foot is their average, or 10 or 12. Whereas we have a lot of area that's 1 acre. So I would say in our single family, we're much less dense than Smithfield. In our multifamily, they probably have a little bit on us, but it's probably not as big of a difference as you'd think. Providence, Nibley, those are growing really fast with a lot of townhomes and different things like that. So it is kind of a mixed bag. And Logan has a lot of and a lot of buildings that are exactly mixed use, and what they had to do to get the mixed use in as it is. And the difference is between the 30 and the 16, it's going to look different on the ground. So they're 30 and they're higher numbers. It makes it so they can build podium style development. So you've got apartments on top of commercial, on top of parking garage type of thing. Whereas the 16 and the 12 is going to lend itself more to live work units, townhomes, maybe in the back with a corner store with a ratio, things like that. It's not going to be enough to do those sorts of different things. So everybody's in a different boat. I'd say we are pulling our weight as is. That's not to say, like, it is still a problem in the valley, and regardless of if it's a regional or not, it is an issue. Do I think if we rezone this and do multifamily that developers are going to come in and sell these for really cheap just to help everybody out? No, they're still going to be expensive, but as you have more supply, that helps the supply demand equation at least a little bit. And it does help move the needle a little, but.
Alan was raising his hand.
Yeah, Alan was raising his hand.
You might have to go to a mic for Marie though.
Up to the microphone.
Yes.
You say your name.
Do I tell him?
Alan J. Luce. When we,
North
city
Logan
worker, when we looked at this a few years ago, just a point of correction, Spencer is correct about the number of single family housing. We do have a large amount of 1 acre in North Logan. However, a few years ago, Damon did an analysis when he was looking at this, working with the Utah League of Seasoned Towns. North Logan has one of the highest percentages in the state of affordable or moderate income housing. We hover around 30 to 35%. Yeah, so
That does actually. Would do you mind explaining this for me?
But keep in mind, that's just meeting the definition of the code. There's no such thing as affordable housing.
Okay.
We need to make that very clear. It doesn't exist now in the state of Utah and anywhere. There's nowhere you can find something that would be affordable or reasonable to purchase for anyone. And so you have to put that caveat with it. But as far as meeting the state's code in those types of areas, North Logan is very high. Just my personal opinion, though, I do think that moving towards a very refined and very focused mixed use strategy is probably one of the waves of the future. The reason I say that is because the state is now almost mandating it with the way things they've done. They recently took away through a bill that really hurts North Logan. They took away the ability for cities to provide sales tax incentives. And so a smaller city like North Logan could provide a higher sales tax incentive than a larger city, or we were willing to do that to bring in businesses. They took that ability away. They swiped that off the table, essentially locking most business into Logan now, or the bigger cities throughout each valley. And so, but they left caveats in there, and the caveats to force mixed use is that you can still provide that if you have a mixed use component. But what I'm thinking of is more of like larger areas that do have a master plan mixed use component, horizontal or vertical podium style, the things that you've discussed, then the city can incentivize at that point for the commercial component. They can't otherwise.
Is there financial justification so we go with mixed use and we get the small commercial businesses? I mean, does it really generate the revenue that justifies the costs of the increase in population and traffic? And
that's an amazingly good.
I mean,
question.
are we focused on this because it's the buzzword out there among developers, or do we look at, are there areas that it gets opened up to
So
multifamily.
the only way that it's a net positive, keep this in mind. I mean, people always bring up, they always come to me and they'll say like, you brought this business in because it's bringing the city so much money. Like the medical office down here, they always bring that up.
Right,
They
right.
always bring up, and the city needed that to really just to make it or break it. Or they bring a ton of housing to make it or break it. A simple rule of thumb is every ounce of housing is a net loss. I hate to put it that way, but it is.
Right.
And in the long term, it always will be. And so what you're thinking of is the commercial just offsets it.
But does it offset it enough?
You could almost break even with enough commercial.
Right.
So if it's in those developments and it's enough horizontal and vertical mixed use, my opinion is, and what I've seen from other areas, you could almost break even. But it's not going to be like, I don't know, I'll just pick out a random example, but like a Walmart with 50 stores around the outside of it, which just brings in profit at that point.
And I think that's where my concern of limited or giving up limited commercial really comes from. One last comment related to this and a comment you made, Spencer.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned that several of these parcels won't develop. Why?
I don't know if it's that they won't. They're more difficult to develop just because they're off of Main Street. They're not as desirable. So they will I think everything will eventually. It's the sad truth. And you see it when I go to conferences and talk to cities along the Wasatch Front, and I'll be talking to them. They're like, oh, are you growing? Like, oh, like crazy. You're not. Oh, we're 98% built out.
Right.
Cities get to that, and we're bounded on all sides. And eventually we will get to built out. But it may take a long time to get there, and economically, and just to speak to Alan's point as well, I don't know the exact number, and there's so many variables as far as like increased emergency services, increased things that I don't think, like we always have at the conferences, somebody come up and tell us that we need to rezone everything to 60 units per acre mixed use.
Right.
But I don't think they factor in all the little things. And so it's a give and take. The thing that would help in this case is multifamily does have less public roads involved, because they're usually private roads on the inside, and doing it here as opposed to approving more higher density up further away from our road system. They're going to be using roads that are larger collector roads, Main Street, Second East, things like that, that can take the wear. And they're in locations we can get to water. So I do think that we would get close, really close, or be a net positive with our commercial. But like I said, there's so many factors that we'd have to do a lot of diving and probably get an expert to come in. If we built it now, it would be a positive for the first X years guaranteed, which may bridge the gap until we have some larger anchors come in, just with our city financial system. If we could get some smaller commercial in, you have impact fees right when something gets built. 20 years down the line, we have a large anchor move into some of our larger parcels, and that balances out the budget. But all of that's future. So the land that I say it's hard to develop, somebody could come in and put something on it tomorrow.
Sure.
Or it could be undeveloped for 60 years. You never know.
So Spencer, with that mixed use land, sorry, Jeff,
Oh, you're fine.
it requires no more than 4 units per acre right now, but does it have to have any units like Jeff was saying? Can it be just 100% commercial?
No,
if-
it can be 100% commercial.
It can be, okay,
Yep.
so yeah, so that's to your point. then.
It just allows up to that. So
Okay.
yeah, it's
Just, it just allows that lever to. Oh. it's a multifamily.
Right, yeah.
Quick question, do we have,
Oh, and there's a reason why, Craig.
I mean, I've seen multifamily or multi-use like this where they have a dog grooming on the first floor in a 12 by 12 and all the rest is residential.
Yeah, that's
what I want to stay
that's the
away from.
concern that I have.
I do think we probably could make a couple small steps toward some of this, but it's concerning because of some of the other, they're going to capitalize on residential. And losing our commercial is going to cost us.
And if not in the short term, for sure, the long term.
What if we're smarter with our commercial? Because right now, like Portland, Oregon had an area that was commercial, and after 5:30 at night, nobody wanted to go in there. And California has pockets where they're now doing this too. So they're keeping commercial, but they're adding, so you have townhouses and condos and stuff that are so it's becoming, so now I can get downstairs and go get something. But there's other things that are going in here. And they had to be careful too with roads because you have, you know, obviously big trucks coming in and out. But I went and I stayed just to fill out the community and see how it was going. And I'm going, this is pretty cool what they're doing, because now it's beautiful. It's a feature that you're going, it's commercial. But what they've done is, and it was very creative, was make it so that people actually didn't mind being in there. And so I'm going, you know, if we just pocket and say, this is all commercial. If we want to bring commercial people in, then what's our attraction? They can go anywhere. What's North Logan going to offer them that's different than anything else? And so you have that part that we have to think about, but then you have all of this rural area that's the draw for everybody to want to come here, that small town feeling. So I've spoken to Spencer about this, but when we have this open land out here, and this is why I brought in a couple of different people just to say, would something like this be something that would be feasible, and would the community embrace it? And so it's basically taking and leaving. So you have 120 acres. We developed 20 or 30 of it. So our roads aren't sprawled throughout there. The infrastructure is more, it's just a little easier on everybody as far as like you don't have 400 homes spread all out. You have 100 acres that you can actually go out and enjoy. We could bring in fun winter activities like they do in Heber City and Midway, and now we have it here. So we could bring in a couple of hotels and some nice ones that actually have not quite like that Swiss feeling, but just has a little more personality than some of the hotels we see that are just to accommodate bodies. So this would actually have character and feel like it belongs in there. And so when people come in as tourists, they're not going to have to live here, but we're going to get their money and then they leave. And so then you still have all this open space out there that we can preserve. We don't have to go out and landscape the whole thing. You might have some trails that get put in there, but then you can also have that a little bit of mixed use. I call it the cruise ship that's landed. And that's honestly where a lot of my friends and I have said, we would like to live like that. You know, we'd like to be upstairs in our condo and go down an elevator and be on that main floor and get breakfast, lunch, dinner, clothes. So those are the things right now that I'm working on up off of 1600 East. I don't know if it will happen, but this is the thing that people are saying, we actually like that because it leaves so much open space. And it will hopefully get 2300 up to connect to the development up there. So it will help the city take care of that issue. We're looking at a water feature for storage for the city. So we have an engineer coming in to talk about, you know, what we can do with that. So this is where I'm going. I'm not an expert on any of this. I just know when I've gone places what I've liked, and I know when I've lived places what I didn't like. And the thing that scares me the most is that we might end up, and I don't mean to be rude about Nibley, but it's just an urban sprawl and there's not a place for people to come together. We have amazing parks and great programs, but if you don't have a child that plays sports, then you're, you know, this is what I'm hearing from a little bit older communities. They kind of like just a park that they could go walk in, and it's not all of these people flushing in and out to try to get to the park to get their kids to a sporting event. And they'd like things that for the adults as well. So I guess with your influences with the people that you know, maybe start getting that list of things. And so that's what I've tried to do, is just say, if I'm going to serve here and help you guys, I'll go do my homework. I'll start talking to people. But the one thing I get over and over and over is, can we just do something to save our rural land? And so I spoke to someone that lives in Tooele, and they're trying to do the same type of a thing. We're saying we can do that mixed use condos, townhouses kind of in one area where it does, you know, keeps the infrastructure in a tighter area. And then you have that more open space. And again, I'm going, we wouldn't have to water up there. We're just going to let nature keep doing its thing, and we're going to continue to enjoy it there. People can cross country ski in the wintertime. They can snowshoe there, and you can go up. You've got the canyon right there where people go mountain biking and hiking and camping. So that's a draw to get people here to say, what is it really fun about coming and visiting North Logan and getting that tourism dollars? And we have to think about the traffic as well. So that's why I'm trying, Alan and Spencer, what does that look like? How many people could we realistically, comfortably accommodate here so that it's not a burden on our city, but it might be a thing that says you might get corporate events up there. If you had a barn venue type of a thing, you might get concerts up there. But what does that look like for us then? If we're trying to bring in something like that, you want to ask what could be the downfall? It's great to preserve the land, but what's the downfall? If we're doing our commercial, what's the downfall? Yeah, we might get more businesses here, but then what does that mean? We'll continue to grow, but it will be more houses. So that's why I'm going, I don't have those answers, but I know people that do this, and hopefully that helps us.
Well, I think it's great that you're exploring options with people, and we certainly don't know, can't predict what the future is going to bring, but certainly if we have options to choose from, why that's going to be effective. We just have to keep in mind what reality is right now and what our community wants to be. And I don't know if it wants to be a tourist town.
That's why we start talking about it and
Yeah.
find out, what do you want? What would you
And
like?
whether
400
we
homes?
just
Or
want to be a bedroom community from Logan, or if we want to be our own entity, which I think we do, but we want to have character.
I think, yeah, I was gonna say the same thing, like any of these options would change the character of the city. So we would just have to go into that open-minded. But I think most of the people that live in North Logan right now live here because they like the current character of the city.
Yeah.
So we're not gonna be able to satisfy everyone, but I think most people are here because of the current character of the city, not for what it could potentially become.
But can you buy the 120 acres yourself to keep it the current way, or the 70 acres? So until we can maybe all buy that land to reserve it, I couldn't tell a landowner, I love it the way that it is and you can't develop it.
Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah,
Can-
right.
Can we, as a city, could we buy the development rights for that land and then keep it?
That's what they're trying
So-
to do up on, as you go up Sardine Canyon. So there's a group right now that's trying to buy all of the, they purchased the land on the east, not the city.
Private.
No, it's a private.
Individual.
Yeah. So, yeah, they don't want the development. So
Okay.
that's the option.
So
If you have somebody that has money.
I'm just gonna pause here for a second just to make sure that we get what we need out of the mixed use discussion.
Okay.
As far as anything up on 1600, we'll have to look at those. And as you're going in along that, we'd have to explore that at a separate time. But just looking at the commercial, one last thing I'd need before we move on to the next agenda item here is we've talked, basically, we don't want to do anything. Oh, sorry. go
I was just
ahead.
gonna say, I think to Heron's question, we should address that. Why the city doesn't want to be in development.
Yes.
in the development.
Oh, as far as development rights, buying
It's
development
important
rights.
to know that, right.
It is a complicated thing, and I'll briefly address it. It's a little bit different than mixed use, but essentially, if you have, it's a whole separate issue from mixed use. But if you take the development rights of one piece of land, you could buy those outright. The city doesn't have the funds to do that.
And
The county's
maintain it.
looking into options for that. But it is not a cheap thing to do.
No.
B, you could transfer development rights. But the sticking points you run into, and Nibley has explored this a lot, a few other cities. The thing you run into is if you transfer development rights from one piece to another, you keep this piece from being developed, right? That development rights goes to somewhere else. So usually it's somebody who owns a piece of land up here. They want to move it to over here. You move all their density down there, and now everybody who lives around that is really upset. So it is a very, very difficult thing for a city to go. And actually, private owners are much more successful in that because A, they may have more capital that can be used just for that rather than city services. And B, a landowner can decide to do what they want with their land more than a city can tell a landowner what to do with their land. So that's a brief overview of that. It's a very complicated issue, and the county is looking into it. We'll look to adopt things as we can, but it's not simple, is the base of it. So
Spencer, a quick question. Do we have any statistics of where the people are moving from to come into Cache Valley or into North Logan specifically?
I don't have detailed statistics. So I've heard, like just for North Logan specifically, I don't have any better numbers than anything you've heard. Utah League of Cities and Towns discussed growth quite a lot. The largest portion of our growth is coming from us and our kids. But I have also seen a lot of data showing that we are getting people in too. So people are migrating to Utah as well. That's not insignificant portion. It's also our kids. So that's all part of it. So
One of the statistics I heard relative to that was that we're getting a large number of people from the East Coast. We think California and, west of us, but amazingly, there's a lot of people who are coming from the East Coast. New York, New Jersey, Virginia.
Utah League addressed that.
Yeah.
And actually said that there's family ties. That's usually what the tie is. So, somebody's 4 children.
As you might say, I moved here from Ohio, but truly it's coming back.
Yeah.
The biggest problem is no one's leaving.
Yeah.
Get people to leave. So.
Kick them out.
Run out of water, that might do it.
Yeah. So just to recap here, we could keep mixed use as a strategy in our moderate income housing plan that we'll go over next, even if we don't take action on it right now. The state code says we have to have a timeline. We could have a timeline if we say, hey, we want to increase densities, not to the highest extent, obviously, but we want that to be a strategy, but we're going to evaluate it at the start of next year after we get a well drilled. We could do that. I'm reading from everybody's discussion that nobody's in favor of taking action right now before we know our water situation. I think that's very fair. Do we want to keep it in our moderate income housing plan as an option? Just with a timeline that it will be evaluated later, or do we want to just pick another strategy? What's the feelings on mixed use, if we have any? And it doesn't have to be perfect. We've got till October and different things to work this out, but
I'd like to get the research on it so that we can actually have data that supports making decisions going forward, because
what data do you want to get?
well, from the two groups I'm meeting, I'll try and get as much as I can. And I mean, I think all of us can kind of look at housing sales. There's a list of things that we can start to look at to say what's missing here that's not being addressed in all of Cache Valley. So what's happening in Logan, there's an awesome it's a big, huge development. I don't know if you want to see it, I can show you this afterwards, but it's in the works right now for Logan. And they haven't even put things up for sale and most of them are already sold. So it's a lake community and it's going to be on the Logan River. So there's a big lake that's being put in for wakeboarders, and then there's going to be a separate lake for slalom. There'll be homes that will be built along the river. This is the caveat too. It's for mostly, I think, people that love boating, so that you don't want to own a boat. They will provide the boat, and every 2 years they'll change it out. And they'll provide the drivers.
I'm trying to think though, how does that, what's the parallel for North Logan? Because I don't think we've ever had, right now, the problem is not demand. I think we could build really junky, apartments and every single one would be filled.
Yeah, but you're at a
So-
different price. I don't know. I mean,
I'm not saying we should.
Yeah.
I'm saying the demand, I'm saying, I think that would be true. I think they would have filled it before it is even built, no matter what the quality or the type is. So that's not really, am I wrong? I think everything in the city gets snatched up the second that it's built. So our issue isn't what's attractive to people. It's how do we make sure that we have an inventory that supports, businesses that come here, just the demand for housing. So that sounds idyllic. It totally does. But I think to have a productive conversation about it, we have to think about what can we do specifically in North Logan? How does that apply?
well, it's just the different pricing points. I'm watching right now. We had 20, if we were lucky, homes available to us for the last couple of years. Now we have over 120. We have homes now that are reducing their price. We haven't seen that in 2 years. So, but we still have this demand, but now we have a chunk of people that can't afford what they were originally told they could, what they had a pre-approval letter for. So that's what I'm saying. Right now, it's such a different time than it was even 3 years ago. And North Logan is now finally kind of catching up with a market that it hadn't. You could come here and get whatever you really wanted to. You can get an old house for 80,000. You can't touch that anymore. So, and to build is about $3 a square foot, where it's about 300. So it was about 150 a couple of years ago. So it's like, that would be ideal, $3 a square foot. So yeah, it's about 300 a square foot now. And so that's squeezing people out as well.
Yep.
So that's all I'm saying is, I like though, the fact that they're putting in something that there's still affordable lots that are in there. And then
Do
there's,
you know what those are going for?
yeah, I talked to, so Brett Nelson's the one that's one of those that's on that development, but the highest I think is around that 350, and you're gonna get a lake
For a lot?
for a lot.
How big?
That
Is not affordable.
well,
In any way, shape or
so
form.
but a lake community, it is, because if you go somewhere else, it's like a million.
But I'm saying that's not.
Then you get,
solving
so
any
that's
of
the
our-
lake. So then you get down to where they have green space, and that one is about 125. So still, but now they're gonna do mixed use. That's just for the lot.
Yeah.
But then they'll do mixed use, and then those will be what somebody can actually come in there. So you've got a mix of people. So it's not just all the affluent people getting to live around the lake. So that's what I like, is that they're
But
mixing it.
Isn't that what is going to happen if it's $350,000 for just the land? Then
For part of it, for
I'm
part of
saying
it.
like you're gonna have the wealthy people around the lake.
Some, but you're
then-
gonna have mixed use that will
You said
also have.
120, so what, I did want to actually get the question here, how big are you said 350 for the lake, how big are the lots?
They vary. So again, I just got this a few minutes ago because I was asking him, can you tell me what you're doing in this development?
Yeah, and I don't want to get too
And
much in the
county
weeds here. I think, because right now we're trying to
Yeah, I can
really
tell you later.
come from, and I would love to hear too, because I'm just curious, but I think we need to just kind of discuss, this is more long-term planning, what can we do to alleviate the shortage of housing, or to make affordable housing specifically, if I understand that question correctly, is that?
Yes, we were talking mixed use. I'm gonna, because these two things kind of blend together.
And I apologize,
Thank you.
I'm coming in late, but I'm just trying to get
So
my
I've
feet under me.
These are a moderate income housing plan as required by the state. I just want to emphasize, this is something we need to have updated and do per state code, funding's tied to it. So we definitely want to make sure we do it. We're evaluated and graded by the Division of Workforce Services.
And then lower
And they
income
check and see
here.
if we are doing it.
I'd like to see.
And it has to be done by October.
Well, there's
We have to
a-
pick 3 strategies as part of our plan. So they've got a strategy previously and strategy now. They've been rewritten with this most recent bill. And I've got the ones we have in our current plan highlighted in yellow. There's the page of the front back. I could have made a more concise list, but I did like the context of what it was and what it is now.
So it's 3 from among this entire list.
3 from among this entire list. We can choose to stick with the exact ones we have. But there are about.
Keep Jeff happy.
So the few things that we have now, if you look on that first page, it's rezoned for densities to assure or facilitate the production of modern housing, which they changed it to. I feel like that's a strategy we've worked towards, and we've rezoned several single family developments where lower density into higher density. I feel like we're working towards that. I feel like we could keep that option. The other one we have is the mixed use, and it's on the back of that first page that we just talked about at length. There's pros and cons to keeping that as a strategy. I think we better have intent to make changes if we want to keep that on our list.
You can't just keep it indefinitely, the ADU.
No, we have to have a timeline on it now too, is one of the changes. So you have to have a timeline as to what you're going to do. They're really looking over our shoulder now. The other thing is allow for and reduce regulations for accessory dwelling units. The problem is they don't really take into consideration if you already have them or have had them in the past. We had ADUs way before anybody in the whole city. I got calls from just about every city asking about our ADU ordinance when this came down. Because we've already got it in place and there's not much tinkering we can do with it, I feel like we may need to pick another option from the list on that, because we can't really give a timeline there. So this list, we have till, again, till October to go through this. I thought it would be good to scan through with everybody here, and I'm not going to read through each one. I think that's kind of tedious. But just things that stick out to council members, planning commission members, that are something that we could implement in our city and that we could have a timeline to implement in order to meet our state requirement is the baseline. Go ahead, Buzzy.
I get to ask a dumb question now, Spencer.
Go for it. Yes.
We have implemented accessory dwelling units. Why do we need to change? We're already needing that.
He was just saying.
They don't give you credit
has
for
to be
things you've already
for the
done.
future.
So
It's already allowed.
yes.
Are they saying to make the code even more?
We have to do
lax?
something.
They're saying we could make the code more lax, or we have to pick another option. So
What if
unless we're
we
going to do
just
something
in-
going forward, we have to pick something
What
else.
if we just encourage it? Like, what if we
What if we
just,
market it?
yeah.
What if we social media, we allow?
The thing about these bounds are they're very subjective.
Okay.
So the Division of Workforce Services is going to evaluate if we do our plan, but it's not like an equation where you get the right number and they can grade your paper. If we had something in here where we're going to encourage ADUs, and we probably would want something concrete, like we have a newsletter and thing about it. We have a few different workshops to like invite somebody in to do a workshop on how people can renovate their basement or something. If we do something concrete to encourage ADUs, then maybe we could do that. It is pretty clear that it says you have to allow for or reduce regulations. So I think without changing our code to make it more lax, they may not accept that. They may look at us like kind of with squinty eyes, like, and Division of Workforce Services is not very
And then
lenient on things.
is the assumption that next year we'll have to do the exact same thing, so we'll have to lessen our, does this continue each time?
Yes. I'm not going to comment on if I think this is good state code. I'm just going to say that this is the state code and we have to follow it.
That's the problem I have with it.
Well,
It's just-
and it's
didn't
hard because it's like North Logan's not gonna be able to do the same thing that Salt Lake City is. So that's hard.
Right.
No, but you do have a lot of homes that are bigger and you have people that are still staying in them that are older and they would like to use their basement as a
I know you
rental.
would.
Mhm.
The internal's already required, like we have no discretion. Internal is now mandated, so there's no discretion with that. So I guess we could make, we could be even more lax about, I guess, with it is internal accessory dwelling. units,
Yes,
and they
it's
address
it's
that.
external as well. So if we had a timeline and we said, hey, we're going to reduce regulations for external accessory dwelling units, or detached is the verbiage they use. If we would decided to use that, we could probably select that as an option, but we would have to reduce further our regulations.
Well, that's, yeah.
That would
Yeah,
be
what's the
reducing the
square footage?
regulations, yeah.
Add 8 feet.
Yeah, don't do
But it takes, you know, 12 years to get to it.
He has a question.
Do we have to increase this every year?
We have to be working towards a timeline on these strategies every year. And they may update the strategy bank. I don't know. This code is relatively recent
Does it say
and has
HRA2?
changed just about every year. So it's hard to say.
The problem is, so we've looked at a lot of these over the last couple of years, and they get harder and harder, especially for what we feel like the telling where the temperature of the community is, our density. So I like the 3 that are here. When it comes to accessory dwellings, I do actually think we should look at whatever the minimums are, and I'm not, not to be, I think we're doing a good job with accessory dwelling. So I like the idea of just the modification that meets the minimum to where we think we're objectively, which is a loose term of how this is written, meet whatever the state's requirement. That's 8 feet, that's a
I think what's
vegetation.
frustrating is how far ahead of the curve we were, like probably 80% of these things on this list, ahead of all the cities in Cache Valley. And now we kind
Yeah, of course, right.
We got to ease off on being aggressive.
Solutions, I'm just mentioning, so.
So Spencer, what is the strategy now versus strategy previously?
So that's another thing with this code to answer, and this ties back into Heron's question on, are we gonna have to do this every year? This moderate income housing bill has been changed every single year for the past 3 years. I know because I've had to update it every year. But this was the previous code and they changed the verbiage. So the verbiage on the left is what was just barely passed
Okay.
in House Bill
We just like
242.
the ones no matter what, because the ones we had previously are overcome by new legislation.
They're essentially, they're very minimal. The ones we had previously, like rezone for densities in order to assure the production of moderate income housing. And then the new one is facilitate the production of moderate income housing. It's very subjective and it's less, so like some of them are the same strategies, they're just slightly different.
What's the square footage that other
Encourage higher
cities
density?
have found?
For what?
Have we looked at other cities
Don't
to
we have
say,
an
okay,
airport?
what's the square footage that you're
We can
requiring?
encourage it
And
all you want.
Are you talking for
You guys would
ADUs?
love This airport.
are
view.
we, because I know we're what, 1,000 square feet?
Yeah, I was
You're
very
less than 1
comprehensive
minute
in
from a
looking at
major
other cities when we initially wrote the code. But they may have, a lot of cities adopted ADU ordinances once this came out, because that was a low hanging fruit. Yeah, I think we were on the higher end when I wrote this. I could go back and look and see what cities have adopted to see if we're still on the higher end of as to what
That'd
we
be
allow.
great.
So we allow 1,000 square feet, or if it's built all over a garage, it could be 1,500 square feet all told, including the garage space. So that allows for somebody to do a unit over a 2-car garage.
So can I put 15 of those on my 2 acres?
Nope, one per. Including if you have a basement ADU, you can't then also have a detached as well. too.
Oh, really?
I
Yeah.
do feel like, is it Department of Workforce Services that's enforcing this?
Yes,
I feel like they probably would say we've done our bit on this, even as it's written now. I don't necessarily think that we're interpreting this right, because based on what you're saying, Spencer, if you go to E, well, maybe use F as a better example, allow for higher density, which we've done already. We don't then have to rezone every year. That wouldn't make sense, right? Like,
no, that is their intent. Their intent is to have cities continually change things to allow for more moderate income housing
So
plans. So
doesn't that
that's,
kind of incentivize taking minor steps every
Yes.
year?
right, so.
yes, it does. These same
I think
concerns,
that's
just
true.
to give people context, these same concerns in the planning conference I went to and the Utah League, when we talk about growth, everybody else is saying the same things as you. So you're not crazy. Everybody else sees it too, as far as the cities. The state, I don't think is going to change it very far
Then
from
I
this.
guess I feel like our strategy needs to be the minimum. Absolutely whatever the minimum is. So I don't feel like when we were talking about these big options, whatever our strategy is, needs to be the tiniest steps
Yeah.
towards
I
it.
think that's true. I do.
So-
I think that's the hard fact of the
If they
matter.
want us to rezone, and maybe this is done, could we rezone for, instead of 4 units per acre, 5 units per acre?
We could change our numbers relatively
'Cause
small and start from.
I
there.
just, because in my mind, considering 12, like, I don't want to do that if we're gonna have to change it again, because I don't want us to get forced into 60, or I just, like, well, what was, you were saying that they were like kind of pushing that mixed use, like, that is not our city, and if we want to maintain character.
Yeah, here's, go ahead.
The penalty if workforce services comes and determines if we have not
Yeah.
followed our plan, they'll say, what is the penalty there?
Yes, so we have to follow the plan
Money.
and we have to report on it. Let me pull up this. So these are slides from the Utah League of Cities and Towns. So we do have to have, so there's priority consideration you can get. So if we pick 2 more options, we could get priority consideration for TIF and TTIF funding. Alan maybe can give a little bit more of an overview on those funding methods. If you would, Alan. I don't know as much about TTIF and TIF as you do. So it's basically state money that we can apply for. I think TTIF is the active transportation fund. So if
They
we
haven't
look to
paid the gas
increase
bill.
our active transportation, it would be very helpful and would be severely detrimental to not have it. TIF is transportation. So they're both transportation funds that they've tied to this. If we don't submit it, we become ineligible from the TIF and TTIF. So
Is that a large portion of our transportation fund right now?
Yeah, can you contextualize that?
Things that I've heard right now, and the things they pushed for the last few years, when they first started pushing moderate income housing, there were several cities that dug in that deal that had no intent so they really.
They're just no nonsense.
Stick, there's no carrot. The stick was, if you do not do this, we'll take away your Class C road funds. Class C road funds are a big chunk of roads that are based, they're people from sales and state tax, they're based on the amount of miles of paved road that we have in the city. And then we get an allotment each year based off of that amount of paved road. So Class C road funds, I can't remember, it's like 350,000 for a city like North Logan. It's a massive, it's a huge portion of our streets. They try to take that.
Okay.
Hyde Park's
Hear me
got
out on this
really
one,
nice
'cause I'm
roads,
just
so how have they
curious.
done it?
Can we choose new ones, completely new ones? What if we then adjust some of the other ones that we've gone too aggressive on? Like, what if we make it, like, we go the opposite direction in ADUs? I'm just wondering. We go the opposite direction with ADUs and then next year
Just keep
we bring it
Yeah.
back.
I don't, so it is very vague and all of this is subjective.
No, it's-
I think we've got to keep in mind, we do have to keep in mind that there is a housing issue. Whether or not it's something we can fix, I don't think it's something we can completely fix. There is an issue. If we can do things that we probably would have done anyway without the state bat hanging over us to help with that issue, I think we should pick strategies that are going to be useful in that direction. How close they're going to look at, say, we only changed it a nominal amount, therefore we're not going to give you your funding. I don't know how fine tooth the comb's going to be. I don't know if they're going to look back at passcode to see that we changed it one way and then changed it back. I don't know. I also would be very surprised if these strategies and items are the same after next year's legislative session. I also am nervous, and I think it's something that we don't need to worry about right now, but we need to keep an eye on. There is a push from legislatures who come from different backgrounds. And they hear a lot of stories from developers who just tell the bad stories of this city wouldn't let me do this, and so nobody has a house.
And very few have ever served in city government.
Yes, and that's the anecdote they hear. I am nervous as well that this will go away at some point and will be replaced with a statewide mandate of, okay, everybody's single family is now a maximum of X square feet. Everybody has to allow at least duplexes on all their single family zoning. And it's not like not to be a fear mongering base and not to even say that anything we do is going to prevent or usher that in, but that has happened in Arizona. I think they can have 4 units per single family lot, just baseline. The state said you can now have 4. I think
Portland.
California is duplex or 4. And they did talk in this last session about doing something similar. I think the Utah League fought hard for cities to not let that happen, which was great. Good reason we're a part of that organization. Also, there's pushback from cities in general, but depending on what the housing situation does, I wouldn't be surprised if this plan is very different in 4 or 5 years. So I think we should plan for the near term on this and not necessarily plan to try to stretch this out for
To game
15
it.
years.
So can I make a proposal on this?
Yeah.
I would suggest that we don't change these, that we
Not
make
now.
minimal entries. We can probably, I think we had a rezone last year that we can use for. And then we let the state, you put them up there, right? They'll take 90 days, they'll review, then they'll come back and give us a chance to fix it.
Mhm.
I can take the chance,
Mhm.
because
Okay.
even if we're wrong, then we've got 90 days to revisit it, make a couple quick changes. But I don't think we should do anything drastic.
Yeah.
See, that is much untough.
So my only question is, looking at L, preserve existing moderate income housing, what could that possibly look like? Because preserve sounds great to me, like that's something I feel like people can get behind. Oh, that's, what, why do we, oh.
Well, there is an L.
Says and new.
Yeah, no, that one's gone.
Is there
Or
a
it's
compromise?
K.
It looks like the letter just got a little bit.
Yeah, they're like, yeah, we're doing
They
that.
combined K and L is what it looks like.
Oh, where's that one?
Okay, it's the one you're reading.
So that would be a landlord incentive program. K and L are both combined.
Well, that's, so we are doing the landlord incentive program, right?
I know that there is some different things through Bragg. We are doing a good landlord program, which I think is different than an incentive program. But we
we
could,
offsetting
I could
that?
check with Bragg to see if what they're doing as far as housing
Well, it
credits
costs
would
an
count
incentive
for us. I
cost
don't know.
somewhere.
Is it worth our effort to get 5?
Oh, oh, not good incentive.
I'll
Where's the application? Under my garage, I have an ADU. Oh, it's like,
Yeah.
Why don't you ask the attorney? I'm far more likely to be like, yeah. Reduce means less than.
Have we seen, do you guys have the data from maybe the police and emergency, but what is the areas where we've provided lower income? What's the crime? What's the concern there? And could we maybe blend it like they did in Daybreak so that you really, you might know that this house here might have been a little bit less expensive, but across the way you've got a blend of people with a beautiful community that way I feel like we're not them, middle, us kind of thing,
There's a difference in, each type of, complex. We can't go over specifics.
Right, but I'm just saying, what could we do so that it's not, we're just gonna make this pocket the affordable area? What could we do it that we actually have a good plan going forward where we're not just limiting and just saying you can only live here?
I think it's not necessarily consistent with this, but I think the good landlord program that we're talking about is that we're trying to do that so that it encourages those bigger developments that tend to have higher police utilization, we'll say it that way. It encourages them to make changes to make their apartment complexes safer.
Right.
And, implement changes internally and on the backs of the owners of that complex versus, having a constant police presence that.
That's why I'm just going, is there a thoughtful way to do this so that we can incorporate this? But where is that? Sorry.
So the other aspect.
Where we have the design-based code.
Yeah, so when they did that, those areas actually do a lot less response. And what they do also that they encourage for the good landlord licensing program is background checks. So the other area that didn't have that, but still don't have that, where they just have no idea who's living. Those are really have problems. The other areas, they have background checks. That's probably more than.
I like that here.
No, sorry. I was not-
So Spencer, could we maybe look into K?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, that, I'll look
Yeah,
into that with Brad. Because I know they do have an incentive. Emily mentioned just a little earlier, asked if it was worth it to try to get the 5, like was listed on that. If you get to 5, if we pick 5 things and do 5, we have priority for those TIF and TTIF funds. Alan mentioned Class C road funds. That's not on the table anymore. Just to clarify, that's not part of it. It's TTIF and TIF. One thing that I think we could use, we don't use that for a lot of projects. We use a lot of CMPO, COG funding. We save up, we get roads to build with development. So it's not a current existing big part of our budget. One thing that we probably would be applying for TTIF funds for would be, say, if we wanted to put a mixed use path along 1600 East to go with our active transportation plan that was just completed. It's for those type of big projects. So if we decide we want one of those big projects on the horizon, we want to put in a big mixed use path, we want to put in a large section of road that's not covered by other things, it would be worth it probably to look ahead to the next coming year before we apply and say, hey, let's go out and get 5 this
But
year.
maybe we wait until we've got something.
We might want to
Yeah.
save a couple.
Okay.
So if we want to try to go after like a 16th East path, a 1800 North, 1900 North path next year, then let's buckle down and get 5 now. But if we don't think that's quite a priority yet, then let's not.
These past, I think path is a high priority.
Yeah,
But are we gonna be able to get funding in other ways? Because I know that's, and I don't know enough to speak on this, but is there, can we get that money other ways?
We might be able to. It's a good source for large projects, but it's also a competitive application process. Logan did get a bunch of TTIF, that underpass, the pedestrian underpass. That was, I believe, TTIF on that. And there are some large projects that are that. There are some other funding sources that are typically smaller. Maybe we'd look to piecemeal a little bit more, or we could look at a different year. Just as a note, we do have a lot of projects that are large in the works. I'm not saying we should add this to our plate. We've got 12th East, we've got a roundabout, we've got a lot of things that we're doing. So I don't know if we necessarily, like, I would love to have that there, but I don't know if we need to add that to our plate.
What about
but-
letter T, ratify a joint acquisition agreement with another local political subdivision? Like, what if we say to Hyde Park, look, 200 or Wolfpack Way, I really am just trying to figure this out. So what if we say, look, Wolfpack Way's gonna go, north. Can we piggyback with them and say, I mean, I don't know, because we've kind of done what we can on our Wolfpack Way, but is there something in that vein?
I could look into that. The wording on this one is a little bit confusing because it does seem like we're buying property to build housing, which seems strange because that's not really the business we're in.
Right.
But I could ask on Utah League, I could reach out and ask for a little clarity, because if it just means having an agreement between two localities to work towards moderate income housing, I think we could absolutely work with Hyde Park. We worked with them on many
That's
things.
kind of a no-brainer.
If
that's
it's
all
that
it
we need to
is.
go buy land with another locality and build the housing
No,
through a bid process, I think that's probably out. So I'll dig into that a little bit.
okay. So the three we have, rezone for densities necessary to assure the production of moderate income housing. I think we're good on that, like if we just designate a small portion. And then our other two, we're kind of saying ADUs aren't gonna cut it anymore.
Yeah. I do think we
Allow
picked
for
another one.
higher density or moderate income residential development and commercial mixed use zones. So are we fine to stay in F?
I think so. I think we could go along the strategy that was discussed and say we're at 4 units per acre in our city center commercial. We bump that up to, all of our numbers are even numbers. So maybe this is an OCD thing, but we bump it up to 6. Or maybe we can do 5, okay? But
Sorry,
all of them are
you
even numbers.
visibly flinched when you said that. Did you see Spencer?
But we can
do
bump it up to 6 this time
5.
and then bump it up to 8 next time.
Six.
So- And that's,
I agree with odd numbers.
that's allowing higher density.
We'll do an
Yeah.
even
So-
number next year.
But did you, he visibly.
They wouldn't see any results from that. So like, it probably won't get built because we went to 5, but it would be, we would have done our part, so.
I just feel like it's forced growth. you
Single
know?
room, it absolutely is.
But it is,
Forced growth.
but it isn't the
is.
worst. I feel like this is the worst possible way to force it. I don't know. That's
Well,
just a
especially-
personal.
Because
The
it-
language that you can't easily understand.
So I totally agree with you, but it's actually working.
I guess, except that
It shouldn't be so on the rural, you know?
I
like,
still
what if
agree
you
with the
wanna
idea of
stay
us not
rural?
changing it if we don't have the water. And I feel like we're forced to do it even if maybe we don't. have the
Yeah,
water.
they
And I
don't accommodate for that. I would say probably what I would do, because we have to give a timeline. So say we keep with F. I would say for our first strategy, rezoning for different densities, I would say we pick our next workshop date, our first one in spring, and we say, hey, we're gonna look at some properties or some pieces of land that maybe are really low density right now, those 1 acre pockets we've already looked at before, and we're gonna look to try and rezone some of those in those time. That could be a great viable timeline, because we do have to have a timeline. On the F, I would probably say we are going to meet and evaluate after a new well is drilled, and evaluate the density, rather than set it at 5 right now. We meet, we see what the water is, and then we can look to rezone later. That way there are a couple points in the timeline, and we could pick 5, we could pick 6. Whatever.
Also on E, like that's internal or detached accessory dwelling units. So
Yes.
we could implement a change to either.
Yeah, we could increase the size of a limit. Like we could make size limit by a small amount higher for
I think that would
ADUs.
be
We could decrease the setbacks by a little bit.
Yeah.
I like
Um,
giving the flexibility because
Yeah.
my property is going to be different than yours.
Yeah.
And I
So
might
we
want to
could do that.
detach.
And
so.
that would be reducing regulations. So we could stick with E and just modify our detached ADU. Our internal ADUs, they're pretty much set. We can't really do anything.
But there
Detached
isn't
ones are
anything that we could like allow an internal, I mean, I don't know if we'd want to, but I'm just curious.
No, not necessarily. We're kind of there. The
Okay.
one thing the state is actually going to require us to track those now. So we're actually going to have to make it slightly more strict. We're going to have to make people do an application
Ooh, we need to
for it
vote
to
out.
track it, but yeah,
Like everyone.
I think detached. So-
It really is a hostile legislature. It is.
It's bad.
I know, I have 2 signs in my yard. and I got
So I'm getting, just to clarify, I'm getting stick with our existing strategies, have longer, smaller steps,
You have both?
timelines, right?
Like, if you're running off,
Okay.
like, one put sign in my yard.
Great. Well, I will, if there's anything else on this, we can go over. If not, I'll go through quickly the last few little things that I had just to almost as updates. Anything else on moderate income housing? We've beat that dead horse. One thing I wanted to talk about, and some of this is going to be discussion, some of it's just going to be informational. We are working, and I'm going to give the credit over to Zach and Jordan and Alan on this one. They've been taking point on a flip the strip program. So this is something they have in like the Weber Water Conservation District, I believe is what it's called. Where they pay a certain amount, they reimburse a certain amount of money per square foot if you flip your strip from lawn to xeriscape. They have a lot of rules, and we can't tag on to that because that's not our conservancy. But we were looking to do something on a smaller scale, just at a city-wide, that the city would reimburse for that strip being flipped over a certain amount per square foot, which would reduce the water usage. It could go to rock, with trees, without trees. Our commercial would have to meet our landscape standards. We do have a set number of trees per frontage, things like that. So the commercial could take advantage of it, and residential in places where culinary is being used to water exterior. Just as an informational thing. Anybody have any feedback or comments on that? It's not all the way set in stone, so we're still working it out. Or does
I
that
have-
look like a good thing to continue to
I
explore?
have Cynthia B that said she'd like to come up here and do a presentation and work with you, but I know Salt Lake City's doing that too, but I'm going, where's the money come from?
Yeah, do we have the money? I think that's a good point.
We do, it's based off, we don't have money as the response, but the thing that we could do. is credit. What we looked into is we give it credit on the water.
Water safe. So that would be most of the people that are not on secondary then.
It would be only people not on secondary.
Oh, and trust me on this, we would be taking that credit.
I did last year and it's great, but it was a lot of work.
I disagree with it because I don't have a strip to flip.
Me either. I got a whole cash. But there's,
All optional.
It's all optional.
Another thing I'm curious is like, does that apply to, because just thinking of my own house, like, we have a big front yard that we've talked about maybe putting some xeriscaping in, like next to like our front entryway. Does it only apply to that park strip?
This, what we've talked about only applies to the park strip, but I mean, we could look to expand it. The risk is
Oh, like people like
Yeah,
gravel their backyard.
somebody
and,
takes
like,
out their whole backyard and they've got a water credit for 3 years,
Yeah.
where they're not paying for water for, that's the risk. Whereas a strip, unless you get somebody on a corner.
I mean,
So-
I think like, there's probably people that are on attention right now on the fence about this, and that if we put a limit on it, even if it doesn't reimburse necessarily for all the work that might just push it over there.
that's
Yeah.
Especially when they
expensive.
see some of those tiered water rates.
We did this in Harriman.
Not him.
And I think it was fantastic because it did save quite a bit of, of money for us. So
one's told me.
I mean, we felt it.
If it's feasible
Okay.
financially, I think it's great. I
And
think
you'll see this, is not, we're not making any decision. You'll see it in draft form still. I just wanted to give people a heads up. And then if there were any comments, steering things that we could get baked in early on, that's better. So sounding like people would like to explore this and see it.
Nicole.
Nice. It is.
People are really trying to freeze us.
They're like, this is how we get the meeting short.
Shaking like.
You've noticed it's got colder the longer we're here. Let's keep moving.
For the first 20 years, this letter is way worse.
Yeah.
The first
John, can I borrow your jacket?
So I'll go quick so we can get into a warmer place like outside or in our cars or in our fridge. So trails, just a quick update. We did have that piece along Bonneville Shoreline Trail that we did acquire. We will look to put that in. We have grants. We're working with Carly to get some studies done to get it in. So we'll get that improved and all the way up around past Wildercrest and keep that going. It is north of Green Canyon. So we do have that stretch now. So you can thank Lindsay for working that deal.
I'm very excited. for this.
And yeah,
I
that'll be
gained a
great.
friend and some land.
And if you know people who are mountain bike enthusiasts, if there are community members that would be interested in spearheading or starting a grassroots to get maybe some loop trails on that land or something else, I think the city would be open to hearing people's ideas. And working
our
with people.
liability?
We're kind of the opposite of Forest Service in where Forest Service wants you to rip something out if somebody built it and they didn't say yes. We would like try to get that collaboration going. So
Can I ask what our liability, I mean, I love it. That's.
we have a lot of trails in our city and there
Uh-huh.
is some liability, but we are covered with insurance for all those. So
Okay.
it's same thing with like canal trails and different things.
Okay.
So it's kind of all part of that. same
Yeah, it's all
umbrella.
kind of looped in. So the increase would be negligible.
Okay.
Another thing, just active transportation, you'll see that draft for approval. Lloyd is going to send that over to us. That has all the other things. I'll move on quickly from that. One other item, accessory buildings. This is more of this is not deciding code. This is more of a judging, trying to gauge temperature on looking at that code. Right now, our setbacks for accessory buildings are written in a way, I had been interpreting them wrong. I thought it was 10 feet back from the front of the house, and then you could go to a 6-foot setback, record away. It's always
I
recorded.
want to hear you say Jeff was right.
Jeff was right, and I was wrong. But it's actually 10 feet behind the house. I had interpreted it as 10 feet back from the front of the house for there are sheds that are 6 feet away if they're 10 feet back from in front of the house. We got clarification from our attorney on that. Just it popped up as a question. It was a simple little thing. We could look to change the code to be in line with the 10 feet back from the front of the house, 6-foot setback. The 6-foot, a typical side setback is 10 feet. So it's giving you an extra 4 feet. In some zones like RE1, it's 15 feet. So in that case, it'd be giving you 9. So it is a smaller setback for accessory building. This is not a dwelling unit. Dwelling units don't fall under this. This is sheds, garages, shops type of deals. The other thing is size and height. Currently, the size limit is 1/4 of your backyard. That's what our code says, which sounds fine if you're on a 1/4 acre normal size lot. If you're on 3 acres, it's really deep. Somebody could have a really, really big shed. And most people don't because you still have to build it, but we could look to change that and set a maximum size. It's hard to pick a number, but I just wanted to judge if that was what people wanted to do. Also height, they can go up to 35 feet right now. So I don't know if that's something that we want to change.
go to
I just
50?
wanted to get thoughts on if we want to look at this. If we do, I'll bring a draft to planning commission.
An aircraft hangar.
Sorry, I'm just.
I think it would be wise to put a limit on that. Like that
Okay.
doesn't make sense to me that we would allow a warehouse.
In a backyard.
Do you disagree? I'm open to hearing.
Could we make it like, we have something
Depends
else
on
where
where
it's
it
like,
is.
it's a percentage
But
or
like
square
on
feet,
your
whichever
land,
is smaller.
like
My land?
do you think that that's something that like say or your neighbors, like would you want to see, if they had a 5-acre lot?
No, that's why I
And-
said it depends on where. Depends on
Well, the answer can't be
where.
anywhere but my adjacent property.
Well, I'm just saying, I'm
Love it.
open. I guess I'm not so close to say that I'm gonna limit something. If I saw something that was really cool, then I go, okay, that might be worth discussing.
But like, I mean, we're talking about personal
Generalities.
sheds or like garages, so I can't imagine I mean, Jay Leno moves in and puts all his vintage cars in there. Yeah, we'll allow that,
I'm
but
more worried about quality and looks than size.
Yeah.
Me too.
Because we don't have a lot of people have 3-acre lots, but if they do,
how do you,
that might be good use for their land, if they,
like if they did an
You just have
acre and a
if you
half.
see the
well, what
right.
can it be, 50%? I thought it was 20%.
20, 25.
That's still.
Yeah, that's huge.
That's excellent.
Jeff.
What you do is you saw the percentage, and then when you get your side, you just say.
And we could-
no larger
Not
than
We
this.
can make the limit really big. I don't want to be too
I
restrictive.
agree.
We could make it be like a really, really big shed that's the limit, but just leaving it open-ended is tough.
Well, especially where it's higher density, but I've got, I don't know, there's a few things I've seen that I'm like, that could be kind of
Just so
cool,
everyone
but
knows,
not,
we have that issue.
not in your neighborhood.
What are
Hey,
the,
you guys,
What
do
are
you
the
want to
issues
share
that
it with
we've
the
had?
class? Oh, what is it?
We've had problems with this. We've had 2 parcels since I've been here, and they come in under this and just literally just put massive weird sheds or barns on random property. And it, not barns, these were just sheds. Then they put them in originally, and they started running a business out of it. They
That's what
rent it
I'm
out.
thinking, is
Um,
that it's like, I buy a huge shed and then suddenly,
And what you're doing with it, it
I'm
really,
not gonna put a
all the
50
neighbors.
shed.
That's more about
Well,
zoning
right.
and land.
But I'm
use.
like,
That's not,
no, there's some
size
cool
doesn't
things
slow
that
that
I.
down.
but like what would you do with it that isn't commercial?
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry.
But that's
That's commercial.
commercial.
Well,
So that's what I'm
But it
saying.
was, it was in a residential area and it was so cool. And I'm like.
that's
man,
still
that was-
commercial, and I would like to limit people's ability to do it.
Well, it depends on, again, I'm going, just depends on where, and we don't have a whole lot of where left, so,
Yeah.
Then they can buy some.
yeah.
The one thing,
Wyoming.
and I'll look at,
Right, and
I
there.
think make a proposal.
Remember
I'll-
that?
I'll look at a
where they
draft.
Live in
But I
there?
think it makes sense to have an
Okay.
upper limit to that.
on the,
Commission to that first, right?
yeah, it would go to commission, but I wanted to make sure that was something we all wanted to do before I plowed ahead with it. The other thing, just on that setback issue. So as far as that setback, I'll bring that in as a proposal as well, but yeah, that would get in line with how I'd interpret it in the past to change it, or we keep it the same. The next thing is just a quick note, general plan RFP. I wanted to get somebody in here today to talk about it. I couldn't get his schedule lined up. We're probably going to go out to RFP to have somebody work on our general plan with us. The last thing is just anything else that you all have that you want to keep us talking
No.
about here.
Sounds
So
great.
I don't know if anybody else has anything we want to
What if
add,
you were warmer, what would you say?
goals.
Very useful tonight,
Thank you.
honestly, like this is a fun group. And,
Did we record this?
I think it.
Yes.
Yes.
streams.
So I'll
It's
listen
streaming
to it.
and
I
recorded.
apologize. I hope these guys made my
There's some good
excuses.
stuff at the beginning too, Lindsay.
Jeff and I went out.
I talked on and on like I.
Cookies were amazing.
They're frozen now.
They were.
Actually, you better.
Okay,
you better hope
great.
Spencer's wife is
Well, we
not-
will have to close the meeting formally, so the planning commission would have to go back up if we're all
Yeah.
wrapped up. That's all I
We're gonna do it
have.
right here.
Or you can do it here.
Yeah, we're gonna do it right here.
Okay. Yep.
So do I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
second.
You got a
Somebody has to
Everyone
move.
seconds it.
motion. You have to motion.
Wait, I thought you just.
I
motioned
said,
it.
do I have a motion?
Oh,
Do I have a motion?
I
There we
move
go.
adjourned. I second it.
Second?
I'm like,
Motion by
Everyone?
Kenny, second by
Motion
Mary.
by Coach
Aye.
Chucky, second.
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous.
You
Okay.
really run a
Great.
tight ship.